Welcome to The Hot Desk, the podcast where industry leaders pull up a chair to share the stories that define their success. I'm your host, Liamara Caesar, and today's guest has transformed not just what's behind the bar, but what's in your glass. David Gluckman has spent over half a century creating and developing drinks that changed the global alcohol industry. Baileys, Guinness, Cîroc, Tanqueray, Smirnoff, just to name a few. He's the man behind the idea. The one who dared to ask, what if we mix whiskey and cream and make it taste like dessert? Billions of dollars later, it worked. David's story bridges generations. He arrived in London from South Africa in the early 60s with nothing but a suitcase and a dream, and built a legacy that today's innovators in food, drink and culture still draw from. Reading his book was a revelation. In my world, we keep brands alive by working with the creators shaping culture right now. But David's world, it was about building the original brand DNA, the kind that still powers icons decades later. Hearing that history firsthand isn't just a privilege, it's like being handed the blueprint for brand building. And nothing compares to learning from someone who was there, whose experience spans the boardroom, the bar, and those back of a napkin brainstorms. So if you've ever had an idea that someone's called ridiculous, this one's for you. So, David, I want to talk about the Baileys origin story. From that whiskey and cream experiment to a global phenomenon, I think this is one of the greatest stories in marketing. But let's rewind all the way back to 1973 when you received that vague brief from IDV's Irish company to create a new drink for exports. Walk us through the moment Baileys was born and tell us exactly what happened in that Soho kitchen with you and Hugh Seymour Davies.
I can tell you, I remember it as if it were yesterday. We just set up as a company in our own right. There were two of us and a secretary. We set up office in a small penthouse. Well, basically, it was one room with a balcony right opposite the Groucho Club in London. And right next door to John Hegarty's place called The Garage. It was in Dean Street. Okay. And I got a call on the Friday afternoon from Tom saying the Irish want to develop a new brand for export because the Irish finance minister has just introduced a scheme whereby any brand that generates high export income will enjoy a 10-year tax holiday. That was the brief, that's all. Didn't know who the person was for whom you're developing. I had no idea about what they liked, what their competences were, anything. I got into the office. I used to live in Cockfosters, which is miles away from Soho. Got into the office at 8 and hung around waiting for Hugh to get in about 20 to 10. But he was a copywriter by training, so he was invariably late. And I remember saying to him, what are we going to do about this Irish brief? And unlike me, Hugh worked to live rather than live to work. So he had completely forgotten what the brief was over the weekend, and I had to repeat it. And in the back of my mind was Kerrygold. Is there anything in the Kerrygold experience? I remember going around a creamery and saying, how much cream goes into every packet of Kerrygold? And they said, oh, about a pint. And I loved that. That's a pint of cream in every packet. That became an ad line that we used for a while. And I said to Hugh, do you think there's anything in Kerrygold that we could bring to bear on this? And he said, well, what happens if we mix cream and whiskey? And I was a bit pissed off with him now for being so late, so I almost grabbed him by the nose and dragged him down the stairs to International Stores at the bottom of Berwick Market. It's no longer there. And I remember we bought some cream. I found a small bottle of Irish whiskey, John Jameson, and I said, let's get back to the office and mix it. We had a small makeshift kitchen, which was basically a sink, on top of which our secretary's typewriter stood. We had to remove everything. We mixed the cream and the whiskey together, and it tasted pretty horrible.
Oh, gosh.
We both agreed that. So I said, there's still something here. Let's go look again. We went back to the supermarket. I found some Cadbury's drinking chocolate, powdered chocolate, added that to the mix, bit of sugar to taste. If you said, what are the proportions now? I would have no idea. but shook it up, tasted it, and it tasted really nice. It's like a slightly alcoholic chocolate milkshake. And the cream made the alcohol seem stronger than it was, although I couldn't tell you for a minute what the proportions were. I called up Tom. I said, Tom, I've got something interesting on this Irish brief, which is, 3 days later, not bad. And he said, well, come over. If you promise to buy me a curry, I'll listen. And so I poured it into a cleaned out Chef's Tonic bottle, screw cap. Took it over to IDV at York Gate. I rehearsed a pitch in the cab over. I was going to give it to Tom, but he grabbed it from me and said, what is this? And so I explained it while he tasted it. And he said, that's really interesting. I said, can you make it? Bearing in mind the fact that you don't know whether cream can remain stable. So Tom, I said, can you make it? He said, no idea. But he said, we can try. And that was the end of it. Tom said, right, let's not mess about now. I want branding.
Right.
And the first thing about branding is the name. Do you know what you're going to call the thing? And I remember when I met O'Reilly back in the day, in the Kerrygold days, we were having a drink one evening. And he said, if you ever come up with an Irish drink, don't choose a name like mine, O'Reilly. So I said, why? Why ever not? He said, because Irish names have a tendency to sound whimsical. So names like O'Reilly, McGilligan, and so on. And the following day, Hugh and Amy and I took a walk across 2 streets of Soho to Greek Street to look at potential new offices. And when we got there, below the office was a restaurant called Bailey's Bistro. And I looked at it, it wasn't Irish and it was no fixed ethnicity. And I thought, that's the name. I think once you get into that mode in trying to piece a brand together,
right.
It's stuck in your mind now. You go to sleep with it, you wake up with it. It occupies all your waking hours. And then if you see a sign like that says that's the name, you stick with it. So I knew Bailey's was an Anglo-Irish name, but it wasn't an Irish name. So I phoned up Tom immediately. I said, why don't we call it Bailey's Irish Cream? And Tom said, that sounds, and that's the beauty of having a good relationship with somebody who's as much a friend as a client, because you're both on the same wavelength. You both are thinking along the same lines. So when I said Bailey's, I wasn't hustling him. I said, I genuinely believe Bailey's is the right name for this product. And he said that, let's do it. So the next thing we did was to find a designer. And we were quite new at this. And we didn't have any designers. And Amy piped up, my husband's a designer, Bob Wagner. I'd never met him. So I said, can we get Bob to design the label for this? So I spoke to him on the telephone. I said, imagine Kerrygold, but imagine more expensive. It's a drink. People have to pay £5 in those days for it, not 5 shillings. So therefore, it needs to have some gravitas. And I met Bob, and 3 days later, Amy appeared with 12 designs from Bob. And Tom and Hugh and I looked at them, and there was one label that just sprang out to all of us. And we said, we'll go with that.
I think what's nice about this story is that it was a true team effort, almost like an Avengers Assemble moment. You had Bob Wagner on the design, you had come up with the original concept for the liquid and also the brand name, but also Mac McPherson, right, who had to make it shelf stable.
The next stage of Bailey's development was to go up to Harlow, where IDB had their laboratories, and we present this idea to them. And the first person we presented to was a man called Mac McPherson, who was without doubt the most skilled, brilliant, wonderful guy I ever worked with on the technical side, because he could take a thought of ours and turn it into a product that worked. I presented him with this sort of screw cap bottle, which was about 3 days old by then, so he's suffering a bit from shelf life problems. And I said to him years later, I said, when you tasted it, what did you think of it? He said, I thought it was utterly disgusting. But he said, I knew what you wanted, and I knew I could make it better.
I mean, let's talk about the market research. It was brutal, wasn't it? I mean, kaolin and morphine, which is a diarrhea medicine, it being too girly, you know, enough for you to basically sack it off and call it a day. But you hid the report in your briefcase where it stayed for over a decade. And I guess to top it off, someone told you in the bathroom, that shit will never sell. Despite all of this, you stuck to one idea. Why?
Well, I'll go back a little bit when we presented the idea and when Tom bought it. And Tom was sufficiently senior, although he had no particular portfolio. His office was 2 doors down from the CEO. So he was influential. We decided we would go to Dublin with a completed idea. And I said to Tom, let's simulate the brand. So we took Bob's artwork, printed it onto labels, pasted those labels onto bottles, made everything totally real. So when we went to Dublin, we weren't going to give people lots of different options. We were going to say, this is your brand. And in order to back that up, we thought we'd do a couple of focus groups. So focus groups at that time were incredibly rare. I think they were the first focus groups, or amongst the first focus groups I'd ever done. I don't think they were particularly well done, because I think one of the mistakes you make in a group is if you give everyone an opportunity to say something, the first person with a strong negative influences everybody else. So one guy got up in the male group and said, look, this is a girly drink. When I go to the pub, I drink shorts and I drink pints, and I wouldn't be seen dead drinking this in my local. But if you looked at the glasses at the end of the group, they were all empty. And one woman said, well, and again, the negative voice always speaks first. One woman said, reminds me of kaolin and morphine, which was a 1960s diarrhea remedy. Now, once you plant those seeds in people's minds, that becomes, we only did 3 groups, I think, so it wasn't exactly quantitative. So, and we only got the report for this on the day we went to Dublin. So I read it on the plane and said, keep it in the briefcase. But the other thing I said was, let's put it in a pub in London. Couple of bottles in the Allsop Arms, which is on Gloucester Place, just off Marylebone Road. So I'd call in every couple of days and look up at the bottles, which just sat there gathering dust. And then 2 nights before we went to Dublin, or the night before, I called in again, and one of the bottles was missing. And the guy said 2 policemen came in and drank a whole bottle. Now, I don't know whether they paid for it or not, and I don't care, but the fact that they liked it enough to drink an entire bottle was good enough for me. I said, that's it, showtime. So off we went to Dublin. Tom and I left Mac behind. We had a couple of bottles, all dressed up with embossing, which Tom did in his backyard.
So it looked like the real deal by the time you were going up to Dublin.
It looked like a genuine bottle. It was the real thing. And we put it down and said, that's the solution to your brief. And it was very hard to argue with it. I mean, I said, it's like no other drink. We know that it's shelf stable, it'll work. And we presented it to a gentleman called David Dan. And I think all the heroes in this are not people like me, but the people who buy the ideas. Tom, who bought it so quickly, immediately he heard about it and saw it in this tacky little Schweppes bottle. To David Dan, who bought it and made it happen. You can't argue with the fact that Bailey's is hugely successful. As I said in one paper the other day, it continues to print money. And I don't see why Bailey's hasn't been celebrated. I mean, I said in the book, Bailey's has been an Irish miracle. Forget about me and all the other people. It's been an Irish economic miracle. Brings a huge amount of money into the Irish exchequer. I think after the 10-year period, it was doing 4 million cases, so that was all tax-free. It's produced billions of bottles. It exists in 185 or 165 countries. Why isn't it celebrated? And I remember going to Dublin the first time back to the Bailey's factory, and somebody gave me a bottle of red velvet cupcake, a crimson product, and it was utterly hideous. And I tasted it in the cab going back to the hotel, and I gave it to the cab driver. I thought, this is silly. Bailey's is a classic. It's a world, it's up there with Guinness as one of the two most famous Irish brands.
Do you still think there's a chance for it to return back to its former glory?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Why shouldn't people who feel good about Bailey's being a trivial drink not think well about Bailey's if it was seen as a more quality product?
That leads me quite nicely onto your creative process. You have this philosophy that seems to run counter to modern corporate thinking. You advocate for presenting just one great idea instead of a range of options. So I guess what advice do you have for young creatives today that are trying to navigate overthinking and indecision?
There was an agency in London, which was eventually run by my friend Frank Lowe, called Collett Dickinson and Peers, which was probably the best agency, maybe amongst the best agencies in the world in the 1960s. And one of the things we always admired about and wondered about with Collett's was they only ever presented one campaign. If the client didn't like it, he could either drop dead or he could let them do another one. But he'd have to give them very good reasons for doing that. When you move into what becomes an exclusively creative function, you realize there can only be one best solution. And that as a creative person, you must take responsibility for the creative solution. Now, no creative idea is ever perfect, but it's the best that you can do at the time. And you suddenly realize, I remember when we worked on Bird's Eye prior to setting up independently, the first time I went to Bird's Eye with a response to a brief, we put up 48 ideas. And the reason was very simple. A, they didn't really know what they wanted, so the brief wasn't very precise. And B, we didn't know what they wanted. And I remember once a client said to me, if you have two ideas, you don't know what the answer is, or your answer is not enough. And I think to be true to any creative brief, you can only go back with one, and it's your best. May not be the ultimate, but it's your best.
In the case of Cîroc, you had that core idea, which was to create the world's first grape vodka to compete with Grey Goose.
Cîroc was an interesting one because I got the idea 10 years earlier. Somebody said, we want to produce a vodka to compete with Grey Goose. How can we do it? And I have a great belief that if you can do it, make the product different, Don't just go in and say, we're more expensive, we've got a sexier pack. Try and make the basic underlying product story different. Now, in, I think, 1995, I was with a colleague in what was Soviet Georgia, Tbilisi, exotic place. And we were talking to the guy about brandy, because brandy was very popular in Georgia. And I said, brandy was only developed in 1875. What did you develop before brandy? He said, oh, we made vodka. And then I thought, well, vodka is normally made in cold countries from grain. So I can imagine it being made in the great grain basket of Ukraine and Russia. But Tbilisi was about the same latitude as Barcelona. So it's much warmer and hotter. And he said, oh, we made our vodka from grapes. We called it cha-cha. That obviously means something different in Georgian. And that stuck in my mind, grape vodka to compete with Grey Goose, because it's different. And I had a word for grape vodka. I wanted it to be fresher, had a fresher taste than Grey Goose. And that, I think, is a strong argument to put a brand together. But the company decided that rather than work with some old guy from Swiss Cottage, they put a hotshot New York team onto the process. So, of course, they did a lot of market research that said that because Grey Goose was French, this product should also be French, which I hated, because that's just simply letting consumers tell you what to do. I wanted it to be Californian, because I figured the time had come for American products to assert themselves. And then they put it in a chateau, 500-year-old chateau in France, and they made it with snap frost grapes. You know what they are?
I don't know. Tell us.
They're the kind you get in dessert wine, like Sauterne, which they're allowed to get very sweet on the vine, and they're quite expensive. And you could drop a set of teeth into a glass and it would disappear next morning. Wow. It's so sweet. And I thought, well, if you make vodka, what you do is you charcoal it to take all the flavor and character out of it. So what's the point of having expensive snap frost grapes to do this? Anyway, they launched it as Cîroc with these snap frost grapes from this posh chateau. And it didn't do very well. I don't know why. But then they got Diddy to come on board. And suddenly, with his influence, the brand just took off and went up to 2 million cases.
Right.
Because his people drank it. But none of the ads ever said it was grape vodka. And I spoke to many, many consumers who didn't know it contained grapes.
They didn't know or they didn't care, because it was just Diddy's vodka at that point.
It was just Diddy's vodka, exactly, Diddy juice, as it was known on the street. But he was following what the rest of the market was doing. And in my book I write, if I were doing it, I would have done it completely differently. I would have made it American, out of American grapes, and I would have made the flavors, grape flavors, to reinforce the idea. I would have come up with a Cabernet flavor, a Sauvignon flavor, a Riesling flavor. It would have made them much more interesting and would have created its own ethos. Not too late. I think it's too late for Cîroc because of the unfortunate connotations of Diddiness. But I think if somebody was out there and wanted to produce a grape vodka, I still think it could be done, and it could be done brilliantly.
So guys, what you can see here is a Guinness Nitro Surge device, and what it aims to do is basically to create that in-pub experience at home. And there's many different ways which we've tried to achieve that over the years. Even since the 70s, there's been so many different campaigns that we've worked on at Whaler, across Guinness Africa, in the UK as well, as to how we can achieve that. We could take it back to where it all began. So David, do you want to walk us through that experiment?
We had a call from someone at Guinness. He's rather a strange man. He was grey-haired with a black suit. Looked like a cross between a pint of Guinness and an undertaker. And he came into our office. He was very low-key, very quiet. And he asked if we had a fridge. So we said yes, and he disappeared into the kitchen. And then he reappeared about half an hour later with a bottle of still black liquid. He poured it into a glass, and then he put his hand in his pocket and pulled out a plastic syringe.
Okay.
It looked like a 3-leaf clover in plastic. And he put the syringe into the glass of black liquid, pulled it back up, and then swooshed it. And the black liquid suddenly transformed into what looked like a giant brown Baileys. And then it gradually settled until it looked like a perfect pint of draft Guinness. And we tasted it, and it was wonderful. And he said to us, "Would you like to help us bring it to market?" And we were delighted with the opportunity to do so.
Wow.
And I think there was a psychology at work here, because draft, the only place you could get a bottle of draft Guinness was in a pub. So when you said to your wife, "I'm going out to the pub to get my pint of draft," she'd say, "Well, we've got some Guinness, bottle Guinness in the cupboard." He'd say, "It's not the same." So that was his excuse for getting to the pub. I said to the people in the group, "Look, I'll tell you what, I'm going to get the guy in the pub downstairs to pull a pint of Guinness, and I'm going to pull a pint of bottle draft Guinness, syringed. And I'll give you double or quits for your money if you could tell the difference." And not a single guy would take me up on the offer.
Wow. So guys, we're going to try the Guinness Nitro Surge device. It comes with a special can, and we're going to open it and connect the device and see how we can perfect our pour at home. So we're going to turn it on, make sure that the hob is illuminated, pop it on top of the can, and pour it at a 45-degree angle. And that is how you pour the perfect Guinness at home.
You see, that's the giant Baileys I mentioned.
Yeah. Ah, yes, I can see. Go on, what do you make of that first taste?
It's good.
Nice. Oh, cheers to that.
Well, don't drink it yet.
Not yet.
Well, that's it.
You can tell that I'm not an experienced Guinness drinker. Oh, cheers. Quick rapid fire question. First thing that comes to mind, I know your portfolio spans a whole range of products and iconic drinks, but if you had to choose one, what product would be your most proud achievement, success or failure?
I think there are a lot of ideas that I created that weren't successful that I thought were amazing. I thought distilled Guinness was a fantastic idea. And I need to give you some brief context. When Diageo was set up, the companies were dead keen to produce something that was a result of a dialogue between them. And they spent quite a long time working on this, and somebody asked me to go along to the meeting. And the brief that they were working on was producing a Guinness whiskey. And the question they were asking themselves was, should it be Scotch or should it be Irish? And the reason for should it be Irish was they didn't have control over any Irish whiskey. And I went to the meeting and they talked a while. And then I suddenly remembered something somebody had said to me 10 years earlier while going around the distillery. And they said, when you make a whiskey, first you make a beer, and then you distill it and put it in barrel and age it. And I thought, that's it. They don't need to make a Guinness whiskey. They simply need to distill Guinness. And I don't think I've ever been so excited as having an idea that quickly and everything coming together and it being perfect. And the benefits were many. One, you can make it anywhere. If you make Guinness in Nigeria, you can make distilled Guinness in Nigeria. Secondly, you can make it today and sell it tomorrow because it doesn't have to be aged in barrel. Thirdly, you can make it taste any way you want because it's not whiskey, it's distilled Guinness. And finally, you'd have nothing to do with the Irish Whiskey Association or the Scotch Whiskey Association, which laid down all those laws. I was so excited by that idea. I got in my car, drove to Covent Garden and sat next to a designer friend, and we designed the pack on the computer. And we made 40% that big, so that people would see that it was not a beer, but a spirit. And I did focus groups in Dublin the following week. And I delivered it, and I said, you have to do this. Try it. Just do it in 10 outlets in Stoke-on-Trent. It'll cost you peanuts to do, but they never did.
Oh, wow.
I thought that was a great, great idea.
So, David, before I let you go, I want to read a quote from your book, which says, life is pretty simple. You do some stuff. Most fails. Some works. You do more of what works. The trick is then doing something else. So for the people that are watching and listening today, especially in a world obsessed with scaling what's working, when do you know when it's time to stop milking an idea and start chasing something else to avoid becoming complacent?
That quote came from a famous man called Tom Peters in a book he wrote called In Search of Excellence, in which he said that the only way to make things happen is to get people on the high up to champion ideas. You can waste all your time and all your money selling ideas to people in the middle, but it's never going to work because things get dumbed down all the time. And I think we pay too much attention to what consumers say. I said a piece to a guy the other day was, if 9 out of 10 people like what you've got, chances are you develop something mediocre.
So David, tell us the story behind the name of your book. It's quite provocative.
A man called Sir Anthony Tennant, who was then the CEO of IDV, decided to take a couple of bottles of Baileys to a man called Abe Rosenberg, who was really one of the real pundits in the US drinks business. He was a real heavy hitter. And he took a look at the product, at the bottle, which he said reminded him of Vietnam uniforms. And then he tasted the product and he looked up and he said, that shit will never sell. But in his favor, he ran the company that distributed Baileys. And to his surprise and delight, it did.
David Gluckman's career is proof that one bold idea can outlast generations. And sometimes the best research is your own gut. From Baileys to Cîroc, from Soho to South Africa, David didn't just pitch drinks, he pitched stories. To our listeners working in the world of marketing, product or brand, especially those of you building in the alcohol space, this is your reminder. The brief may be vague, the timeline tight and the budget questionable, but when you've got a good idea, make it real. Make sure to subscribe and share if you've enjoyed this episode, and continue the conversation in the comments below.